Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Richard Dugan, and we have a very special guest joining us here on the program to share with us some insights into something that, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people think I should do more of, and that's listening. That's right. We're going to be talking with Michael Reddington. Reminds me of that character on television, that beguiling individual who is always getting out of scrapes and running from the law. But I don't think our guest is running from the law. Michael Reddington, thank you so much for joining us here on the program and sharing with us a method that you created, you've come up with, called the disciplined listening method. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I can vouch there's no running today. So we have an uninterrupted conversation.
Well, and I'm not running either. Listening, there's a, they say that math is the universal language. Some also say music, but there's math in music too. Where I'm going with this is that the mathematical equation definitely supports your thesis, if you will, and the title of your book, because we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth. So that stands to reason that maybe we should listen 50% more than we talk. Your thoughts on that mathematical equation?
I can't argue that math. We should do a lot more listening than we talk. We learn a lot more that way. We'd be able to connect with people a lot more that way. We probably achieve a lot more that way. But I think throughout the course of our lives, we're typically taught that we achieve by talking, not achieve by listening. So it's a little bit of a unlearn what we have learned type moment.
What is it that intrigued you about the concept, if you will, of listening that led you to create this method? And by the way, it goes on to say it's how a certified, I love this term, forensic interviewer unlocks hidden values in every conversation. What is a forensic interviewer?
Yeah, 2 great questions there. So a certified forensic interviewer is a professional designation of expertise. Many industries have them. You have your certified public accountants, your certified financial planners, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a designation of expertise. Like any other professional designation, requires prerequisites, passing a what's the word I'm looking for? A difficult exam. That's not the word, but we'll go with it for now. And then maintaining the recertification credits after the fact. So there are certified forensic interviewers all over the world, from the private sector, from the public sector, from law enforcement, federal investigators, attorneys, academics, HR professionals, and beyond. But really what piqued my interest in listening, believe it or not, well, I guess two careers. I've done many things in my life. Early on in my life, I worked in special education. So I worked with both students and adults who experienced any number of communication challenges based on what they were experiencing in their lives. And then in the world of interviewing, and in the world of interviewing, really, when you look at the back half of my career, what my teammates and I were really responsible to do was we were responsible for uncovering the truth in investigations where there were multiple suspects, no evidence, everybody had already been interrogated and nobody had confessed. So in those scenarios, you really had to allow somebody to demonstrate for you how they needed to be connected with in order for them to choose to tell you the truth. So yeah, having a plan was great and having techniques was great and all these things were important, but you couldn't go in and just enforce your game plan on somebody else. You really had to learn from them first. And the more I applied the lessons that I had learned in that context, in all other contexts, my important business conversations, my important personal conversations, and beyond, the more I really started to reap the rewards. So putting all of that together was really what led to the publication of the Disciplined Listening Method, looking to give everybody else opportunities to achieve the same experience.
You know, it's interesting how what you've come up with, what others have created as well, especially in the context of body language and learning how to read someone's body language and what they're really saying in the what in excuse me in acting is subtext and is that something that is that has been learned, that has been sort of intuitive more so down through the years, and now it's been turned into, am I correct, sort of a science?
Oh, there's absolutely science behind it. And in some aspects, the science might be a little bit conflicting depending on people's particular background or focus with their research. I think to answer your question, a lot of it likely started as intuitive. And then as time passed and the science got involved and the academics got involved, they were able to test, they were able to disprove, they were able to prove, and they were able to narrow things down. So yes, I think at this point it is still somewhat of an art, but there is a ton of science behind nonverbal and even verbal, but verbal and nonverbal communication.
You have a quote, if you will, I guess you'd put it under the category of testimonial, from an individual whose program I absolutely loved, Undercover Boss. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get enough of that. The downside was I could never be on that program because I was like one of two or three at any given time at the radio stations I was working for. So there was no way to go undercover. But I thought it was absolutely one of the best programs when it came to a CEO, the head of a company, a corporation, who was actually willing to go into the trenches, as it were, to observe and to listen to the people who were actually making him the money that his company was making him the products and or providing the service that his company was providing. Do you think that kind of, I don't want to say program, but that kind of concept in the business world, but I know this applies elsewhere, is something that every manager and or CEO and or owner, because not all CEOs are owners and vice versa, needs to take a look at and say, you know, if there was a way for me to go in incognito, great, but there's another way for me to do this. And that doesn't mean you go in and make friends of your employees. What are your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, you're referencing Jeff Duden, who's an amazing individual. He's a very, very unique human being and leader. And he is somebody who pretty consistently demonstrates a sense of humility and curiosity and willing to learn and embrace the thoughts of others, regardless of their rank or tenure, so to speak. So he's an amazing individual. And yes, I do think that type of endeavor, although maybe not part of a television show and with disguise and all of those things, but as leaders, leaders, opening yourself up to the thoughts and experiences and input of others is extremely important. And unfortunately, I think it's a small population that really do it. I think it's a larger population that trick themselves into thinking they do it, and a substantial population that believes it's probably unnecessary. But the reality is the more we climb the org chart, the higher we get, the more our job titles motivate people to be less open, honest, and thorough with the information they give us, because we now have the ability to distribute a wide range of consequences. So people are better off protecting themselves than they are opening up with us. So that means we have to work even harder in order to create an environment where people over time feel like that we have earned their trust and they can share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences with us. So even opening up and accepting that can be difficult for some, but then also realizing, and everybody at the top knows this, that they're so busy doing everything else, they can't possibly know what's going on at all other levels of the organization. So really, the experts at any level of the organization are those who operate at that level of the organization. And we certainly can't paint with too broad a brush, but there is a near certainty that people at every level have information, have experience, have perspectives, have idea that are valuable all the way up to the top. And when it comes to making the right decisions, making them faster, making them with as much information or intelligence as possible, the more leaders embrace the opportunities to embed themselves within the organization and create that culture of communication, the more successful they will be. And Jeff has proved that out with all of his businesses.
I will share with you very quickly that early on in my career, back in the 80s, I was in my 20s at that point, I was operations manager for a station, and I had at one point, and it was very short-lived, by the way, a very authoritarian way of doing things. You're going to do it because I said do it. You know, I'm the supervisor, and so if you will. And what I found was that didn't work. There was rebellion. I'm not going to do it because you tell me to do it. So I had to find another way around that. And basically, as I learned that that didn't work, I said, well, because we have clients who come into this building, it was a very small building, a transmitter site. They come in here to do their programs. We need to have a clean facility. We need to have a place for them to feel, you know, safe and so on and so forth. And so that's why I'm asking you to clean the bathroom, you know, and so forth. They said, okay, I'll do it for them. Okay. And that's when I changed my tack, because I was doing the same job that everybody else was doing. It wasn't like I was sitting in an office and at a desk and so forth. I was running the shows and conversing with the programmers and so forth. Why is it that we seem to have people? Because, well, and let me back that up. With that concept, there is no listening going on, is there? And why is it that that concept seems to be at the forefront of a lot of what we're dealing with today, both in government, in corporations, in all sectors? It's like people are very territorial, and it doesn't matter what you have to say. I'm the boss.
Yeah, that's a layered answer. We could go a lot of different directions with that. I think in general, unfortunately for most of us, we were taught to speak when we were children.
Mm-hmm.
We were taught to speak by adults, and we were taught to speak by adults who treated us like children. So now we all grow and we become adults and we have to talk to other adults, but we were only operationally conditioned to treat people like children. So now we take how we've been talked to our whole life and we try communicating with other adults the same way. And we sit around and we blame them when it doesn't work. When in reality, we didn't use the right technique for the right situation, for the right conversation. So people tend to, and I'm not going to get into all the psychology and all of that stuff. Number one, because it's not my degree, and number two, because it's a dangerous conversation. But it's easy for people to become defensive when they feel like they have something to lose. It's easy for people to become defensive when they feel like they have something they need to protect. It's easy for people to become defensive when they feel like there's an image that they're supposed to portray. And when we allow all of those concepts to overrule the outcomes we can create and the relationships we can develop all the way, then it's easy to fall prey to the roughly 175 biases that we already have in our instincts for protection and create these entrenched conversations or communications, if we can even call them that.
Incredible. Well, Michael Reddington is our guest here on the program, and we are going to talk more about this whole aspect of disciplined listening and his method here as we continue on Tell Me Your Story. I am Richard Dugan, Reverend Dr. D, believe it or not, and we're so excited, quite honestly, because I am always looking for ways that, for example, when I look at the wave on my editing screen, when I go to edit this interview, for example, if I am able to see, if there's actually a way to gauge this and it's more a visual thing, 50% or more of the conversation going to the guest, I feel like I have won or I have succeeded or I've done good because I haven't dominated. Do we have a majority of people who they want to win? So they want to dominate because they think that by dominating, somehow they've succeeded in, I don't know, convincing the other person or the group of people. It's what it, and again, it's different if you're giving a talk up in front of a bunch of people as opposed to, a conversation like we're having. Is that a fair gauge, or should it actually be less than that? Should I be looking and saying, it should be more 35 or 40%, or maybe 25% me and 75% the guest or the person I'm talking to?
There's a couple of great questions layered in there. To answer the percentage one first, from my perspective, for what it's worth, that's going to be contextually variant. So who are you talking to? What's the topic of conversation? What's about? How's it flowing? To be quite honest, I think 50-50, give or take in either direction, is probably a good place to start for this. But if I'm giving you very short one-word answers, I'm not giving you anything to go off of, I'm not taking what you give me and running with it, then you might be talking more, and that might be no fault of your own, other than unfortunately selecting me as a guest for your show. You might have to fill the blank. So all of those contextual agreements or contextual considerations really have to go in. I think it's more than just a percentage. Okay. But I do believe that by and large, if we are under the 50%, then that's probably where we should be. If the other person is doing 51% or more of the talking, then that probably is more often than not indicative that we're doing a better job listening, taking other contextual factors out of the conversation. But when it comes back to the first thing that you said about needing to win, that's part of it. Again, it's going to differ from person to person, and situation to situation, but whether it's the need to win, whether it's the need to feel comfortable, whether it's the need to feel in control, whether it's the need to feel in charge, whether it's the need to feel heard or understood. And if I want to make myself heard or understood, I need to talk more. Sometimes it might honestly be the opposite because I'm so uncomfortable, I might just continue to talk. So there could be any number of reasons why somebody might feel that the more they talk, the better it is for them in a conversation like this, like not what you said, up talking in front of a group of people or different context. And that's where really as a listener, elevating your situational awareness becomes so important. Because if we can understand why the other person might be talking more, then we can do a better job adapting how we communicate with them, either maybe to get them to change their approach or to take advantage of the shorter moments that we have available to us in this conversation. And then it can be much harder to have an accurate read of ourselves. I mean, we can all debate how honest we really are with ourselves, how accurate our evaluations are of ourselves compared to how other people would evaluate, and so on and so forth. But if we can do a better job understanding, wait a minute, am I really trying to maintain control? Am I trying to win? Am I comfortable or uncomfortable? Am I working too hard to be understood? And what is the fear or the motivation that's driving that? Then we can do a better job being quiet and allowing other people to lead the dance so we can learn more and honestly achieve more.
By the way, I mentioned, people reading body language earlier. And one of the things that I have noticed in our conversation is you're standing as opposed to sitting. Is there a reason why you choose to do that? What's the impetus behind that? Because it seems to me that's got to be part of this disciplined learning method, disciplined listening method.
I think for me, well, to be completely honest, when I first started doing podcasts years and years and years ago, my wife watched one and told me that I would be better off standing up than sitting down. So first, all credit goes to my wife, who is consistently the smartest person in the house. But honestly, for me, when I'm standing, I feel more alert and more engaged. So if I'm on my feet, I get to move a little bit more. I get to be a little bit more non-verbally involved with how I illustrate and how I move in the conversation. It forces me to think more. So for me, I feel like I'm more engaged, more attentive, and more involved when I'm on my feet than when I'm sitting down. So it makes for a better conversation.
I also noticed too that you don't just talk with your mouth, you talk with your hands too. And a lot of people do that. And it doesn't that sort of help. And when we're listening to someone who is doing that, as I just did, uh, what is that telling us about that person?
Well, it can tell us a whole lot. So, yes, illustrating helps in any number of ways. When we illustrate, talk with our hands, it can help us access our own memories. It can add emphasis to what we're saying. It can add additional context for our audience. Sometimes it can even take the place of words, fill in the gaps of words, help people understand things that they otherwise might not have understood. So all of those things become important. So yes, there's tons of benefits from it. What it can tell us about another person is a whole lot. Number one, it can help us establish their behavioral norm. So how much were they talking with their hands, or how much were they illustrating in general at the beginning of the conversation? How does that illustration change on time to different topics or different parts of the conversation? Do they appear to be illustrating more or less? Do they appear to be more guarded? Do they appear to be more open? Are the illustrators becoming more exaggerated? Are they smooth? Are they choppy? Are they having it a faster speed? So lots of things. Are the illustrators happening on time to what they're saying, or is there a delay? So if I'm telling you, we need to get this done this week, which would go back to how we were talking about not communicating earlier. But if I'm pounding my fist at this week, all right, well, I'm emphasizing this week. If I say this week and then 2 seconds later I pound my fist, now that might be an inauthentic illustrator because I'm trying to add value to something that I previously said. So there's no shortage of intelligence that we can gather by creating patterns in how people communicate, and then looking for variances in those patterns and judging what they likely mean in the context of the situation.
Interesting. Michael Reddington is my guest. It's the disciplined listening method, and this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and we're talking about listening. Almost two terms, listening and talking, that are in some instances diametrically opposed, but definitely necessary in being able to get things done, enable to have a meaningful relationship. And that whether it's in the family or in the workplace or just out and about, wherever you might be. What you have in your book, these 7 core behaviors. Can you talk to us about those? And maybe we'll dive into a few of those in just a few moments.
Yeah, sure. I'll list them out for you. Feel free to cut me off anytime. Of course, it's your show. Essentially, the book became a necessity after the completion of 2 research projects, among other things, but they were really the 2 catalysts. One research project we set out with a question, and that question was, how come some people are consistently successful when they're going into conversations with the odds stacked against them? Like, looking from the outside, these people should not give you this information. These people should not give you this decision. Yet there's certain groups of people that are consistently successful in that type of environment. What are they doing differently? So the end of that research was the 7 core behaviors of the disciplined listening method. That was the culmination. When you look at the first 2 methods, those are pre-conversation behaviors. So the first one is really understanding how any conversation can get you closer to achieving not just your short-term tactical, but your long-term strategic goals as well. Every interaction we have is a link in multiple chains. So how are we using these links to get us closer to the end of the chains with the outcomes we want? So number one, understand how any conversation can get you closer to achieving both your long-term and your short-term goals. Then number 2, when it comes to strategic planning, was understand how we can build our strategies off of our perceived weaknesses, not our perceived strengths. All too often, if we go into a conversation thinking about, well, these are my advantages, these are my skills, this is where I really have leverage or an opportunity, we can create blind spots, fall into the entitlement trap, and end up being less successful than we anticipated. But if we prepare by asking ourselves, okay, whoa, why shouldn't this person say or do what I want them to? Why haven't they already done it? What do they need to experience to overcome these things? And how will every step I take help me achieve these goals? Now we can capitalize on the reasons why we might not be able to achieve what we want and build our strategy around that, leveraging them instead of trying to avoid them. Then to piggyback on something you said earlier, the third one is once the conversation starts, be patient and let the conversation come to you. Listening equals learning. The more somebody else talks, the more you learn, the more data you gather, the better decisions you can make, the better connections you can make, the better outcomes you can achieve. So be patient. Allow the conversation to come to you. Now, the next two go hand in hand while we're observing. Please give up trying to catch people lying. There's no point. It creates more problems. We're probably wrong more than we are right. It is fraught with peril. Instead, like we were just talking about earlier with pattern identifications, look for changes in somebody's comfort level. At any point in time in the conversation, does somebody's comfort level appear to get higher or lower, more comfortable or less comfortable? When you see their comfort levels change, ask yourself, why? What just happened? What caused that comfort level to change? If we believe we can accurately understand the trigger that caused somebody's behavior to change and evaluate it in the context of the conversation, we can get a really good idea of what they're thinking and feeling at that moment, which allows us to adapt. Now we can change our approach based on the new intelligence that we have. The next one is maybe the most critical of all. We have to help people protect their self-image and safe face throughout our conversations. If we want people to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences, if we want them to change their mind and accept outside ideas, they need the opportunity to save face. It's our job to give them that. And then the last behavior is post-conversation, which is build trust equity through post-conversation follow-up. There's a big difference, all religious connotations, of course, between trust and faith. We tend to trust what we have evidence for, and we tend to have faith in the things we believe in strongly, but lack evidence. So if we want someone to trust us, what are we doing after the conversation to continuously give them evidence that we are trustworthy so the next conversation is easier?
What flashed in my mind was an experience back in 2005. The radio station I was working for was being purchased by what I refer to as a Christian consortium. Now, they were also buying another radio station that was a Christian station that I had worked for in the 80s and early 90s for 15 years. And they had been interviewed by the local paper in Phoenix, asked, hey, are you going to keep Air America Phoenix as is? Because, and so forth. He said, well, you betcha we are, because they're making money. And I had, as I said, I worked for these kinds of people in the broadcast industry for 15 years in the 80s and early 90s, in the heyday of the televangelism scheme and scam and so forth. I knew they were lying, because there was one passage that was always driven home on many programs, and that is, be ye not unequally yoked with non-believers, which is what they thought of us who worked for the Air America Phoenix station. Well, January 2nd, came to work. We're flipping the format February 28th. We're going to something new on the 1st of March, and everybody's being let go. Surprise, surprise. And I wasn't going to start looking for a job. I wanted to see it through to the end. And so I was there until the 28th. And that was one of the things that I found so interesting, was when I started listening to folks of belief, if you will, and conviction and so forth. And I don't want to be denigrating, but I thought, okay, this is where they're coming from, and I have the same kinds of convictions and beliefs and so forth. I usually refer to them as philosophies, Michael. And I have to wonder sometimes, when we get into conversations with someone and we have a particular perspective, And we're here. And this is part of the reason why we have the polarization here, as well as across the globe, that we do have today, is nobody's listening. Um, I do have a conversation with a good friend who has different views from mine, but we're still very good friends. My brother and I are on opposite poles, if you will, but I still love the guy and he's still my brother. We're not estranged. We have conversations. We text occasionally and so forth. And he and I both have the same right to believe what we want. How do we where do we begin? Let's just say, okay, you know what, Michael, you touched a chord. A listener is saying this. You touched a chord in me. I'm really tired of being alone. I mean, yeah, I'm around all these people that think and believe the same way, but I miss this person and that person and so forth. And we had such a great interaction and so on. Where do I begin to reconnect with this person? How do I begin to listen with an open ear, an open mind, and even an open heart?
In that situation, we have to value the outcome more than our emotion. So if I have been estranged from somebody who I used to have a great relationship with, something came between us, and I'm interested in rekindling that relationship, maybe we'll never get back to where we were, but get back to a mutually beneficial and appreciative relationship, then I need to be able to value the outcome of that relationship, what that relationship will mean for me, my family, each other, whatever it is, more than how I feel along the way, which runs counter to how our brains are wired.
Yeah.
We're wired to seek out information and ideas that are consistent with what we already think and believe. And we're wired to disregard ideas that are inconsistent with what we already think and believe, that make us feel uncomfortable. And unfortunately, as a society, we become more and more incentivized not only to pick the group that you closest align with, but then to get the most attention from that group by being the loudest person in that group. So really, by changing our ability to focus on the outcome, we're also changing our incentives. Once we change our ability to focus on the outcome, we become more outcome focused, then we can change our incentives. Now I'm not incentivizing myself by being accepted by a certain group or being rewarded for a certain statement. I'm going to incentivize myself. I'm going to be proud of myself. I'm going to reward myself for listening to perspectives that I might not agree with, from learning from somebody else that I might have previously disagreed with. If we can focus on outcomes, if we can change how we incentivize ourselves, and if we can be bold enough to embrace the risk necessary to start the conversation and honestly own the responsibility for it, then we can start making inroads in that direction. But without the ability to do that, then we're probably going to find ourselves forced back into our echo chambers, which unfortunately is really easy to rationalize or justify.
My brother and I did have a conversation following my sister's memorial back. It was about 2, maybe 3 years ago. And as the conversation started, I began to realize where this could go. So I said to myself within, I said, it doesn't matter where this conversation goes. He is always going to be your brother, and you will always be proud of him for the things he has accomplished in his life. So keep that in mind as you move forward. And we had a couple of moments where the heat rose just a little bit. But what was interesting was at the end of that conversation, we agreed on 3 things that we both felt needed to be fixed. We didn't necessarily agree on how, but we agreed on 3 things. And that was something. And I'm, my brother's younger than me. He's already retired, and I'm just turning 65 in a month or two. But that's fine because that's my choice. And he's already living half his life in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, and half here in the States. Fantastic. I couldn't be prouder of him for accomplishing that in his life. I think that's great because I'm pretty happy living here in Santa Barbara. It's pretty exciting. It has its drawbacks, sure, but it's It's a heck of a lot better than where I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, where they turn up the thermostat around March or April, if not sooner. Fascinating to converse with Michael Reddington about his book in terms of listening, the disciplined listening method. And we're going to continue here on Tell Me Your Story. We are talking with the creator of the disciplined listening method, I kind of came up with the DLM acronym, if you will. Uh, I'm curious about, one of the things I mentioned earlier about body language. I went through a personal growth program where they taught us how to sit in terms of being open to listening to whoever's speaking, regardless of what they're saying. And that was what's called the open body posture. You're sitting, both feet on the floor. And of course, in these situations, you put your hands, palms down on your knees or on your above the knee, if you will. And that's what they call open body posture. But even standing, you can do that with your hands down by your side, because they say that if you put your hands in front of you, you're trying to protect yourself. You put your hands behind you, clasp, you're protecting your rear end. These are the theories anyway. Um, are these concepts that are valid in the process of listening, not just in terms of observing the one who's talking, but in terms of our openness physically, our body language in terms of actually listening? Is there some truth in these concepts that I just mentioned?
Yeah, there's some for sure. There's definitely research that shows there are postures or stances that affect how we think, how we feel, how we believe, for sure. So if I put myself in a more open position, could that be affecting my ability to listen? Yes. Maybe more importantly, does that affect the interpretation of the person I'm communicating with so they feel like I'm open to listen? Sure. But I'm willing to bet every single person listening to this conversation at some point when they were really concentrating on something, closed their eyes and looked down. Or maybe look straight up at the sky.
Mm.
Or if something really, really made them stop and think, they crossed their arms and leaned away. And that had nothing to do with protecting themselves, with feeling defensive. People don't stand with their hands clasped behind the back because they're protecting their rear end. People stand with their hands clasped behind their back because maybe at some point in their life, they were trained to stand that way. Military, law enforcement, school, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a comfortable way for them to stand. But I would highly doubt that anybody on a subconscious level is standing with their hands behind their back, protecting their rear end, unless they believe that there is a potential threat behind them, either a physical threat or maybe somebody looking, staring, getting too close, that kind of thing. But if it's just you and I standing in the hall having a conversation and there's nobody else in the building and nobody else around, and you stand with your feet shoulder width apart and your hands clasped behind your back, to me, you're more than likely somebody with military or law enforcement or some sort of other formal background that has taught you to stand that way. And people don't cross their arms necessarily when they're defending themselves. In fact, there's probably a good argument to be made that that's the least amount of times they cross their arms. People cross their arms when they're either feeling physical comfort or emotional vulnerability. My back hurts, I'll cross my arms. The chair's uncomfortable, I'll cross my arms. I'm cold, I'll cross my arms. Somebody said something that really causes me to think in a way I've never thought before. I might cross my arms. My former teammates and I have reels of videos where people would confess with their arms crossed. So it's very important. Single factor decisions are deadly. When we're observing other people's communication, we don't want to make a determination based on one observation. We want to make it off the totality of circumstances, behavioral clusters or groups as much as we can observe. But to get back to your original point, if we really want to listen, then it's important based on the situation that we're in, that we put ourselves in the physical position that we believe will help us the most. And that can be different person to person and situation to situation.
When you're talking with someone, Michael, and you are picking up that they are comfortable, they are at ease. Um, I know there are those who would think, okay, now's the time to strike because they're vulnerable. when in fact that will actually cause them to shut down, in a matter of fact, or close off. Or I like to use the Star Trek analogy, they'll put up the shields, and now nothing can get in. And it's in essence, the conversation is actually stopped because now it's just you dialoguing because because you said something, you may have even done something, your posture might have changed to the extent that, you know, that's another aspect too, in that respect, when they have shut down for whatever the reasons are, because it's something going on within them, something that you triggered. You're not necessarily at fault, but that you triggered by a word or a phrase or what have you that brought up something within them from their past. Uh, are there ways to help them to lower their shields, shall we say, so that you can continue the conversation and not continue just your dialogue, your monologue, if you will?
Yeah, and again, there's a lot to unpack there. So I do agree that when somebody is comfortable when their shields are down, then they're more likely to open up. But we also have to be very strategic in many high-value conversations with our approach. Questions can be perceived as invitations or attacks. As soon as somebody pushes their guard down, if they feel like I'm pouncing on them, their guard's going to go up higher than it ever was to begin with. So making sure that we really think strategically through what's the value of the outcome, what's the value of the relationship, how do we approach this in a way that helps people save face and protect their self-image, can help us from kicking those shields back up. You also said that it might not be our fault. We might have triggered something. Yeah, agreed. It might not be our fault, but it's our responsibility.
Okay.
We're the ones that unintentionally kicked them off, and we're the ones that are going to have to very intentionally try to bring them back down. So I would agree that it might not necessarily be our fault, but it's likely our responsibility at this point. But to get back to the core of your question, are there techniques? Yes, there are. And the right technique is going to come down to the totality of circumstances. So in any given situation, how we're communicating with each other can be based on half a dozen factors. You, who you are as a human being, me, who I am as a human being, our relationship, the topic that we're talking about, the perceived consequences attached to that topic, and the environment that the conversation is taking place in. So depending on the situation, maybe the environment is the problem. Maybe we need to take a walk. Maybe we need to go somewhere else. Depending on the conversation, maybe the questioner is the problem. Maybe you don't feel so comfortable opening up to me, but you'd feel comfortable opening up to somebody else. So we need to reschedule this conversation, sub somebody else in, have it at another time. It could be the approach. It always comes back. I shouldn't say always. That's a real difficult word to use. More often than not, it's going to come back to helping people save face. So now when I help them save face, one of the things that I don't know that I would ever coach somebody to do is directly label. So, Richard, it really looks like I said something that made you angry. Why are you angry with what I just said? That is so fraught with judgment that you could very likely look at me and say, I'm not angry, which is only making you more angry. So generally speaking, when we see a behavior change, again, more often than not, situations are different. I wouldn't coach to directly address it right away, because that is when it's raw, that's when it's real, that's when it's at the highest. So I wouldn't say, wow, Richard, you look angry. Wow, you just crossed your arms. I guess because you just clenched your teeth and looked away and shifted in your chair, you disagree with what I just said. All of that makes me sound more judgment-worthy, more judgmental, less trustworthy. And now you are hyper aware of everything you're doing because I just called it all out. Instead, what I would more than likely do is let it slide for a little bit. I don't know, 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, different day. Every situationally different. But let's just say I let it slide for a couple minutes. Then I might come back to something like this. Oftentimes in conversations, I've got to step back and realize that I might not be seeing a topic the way the people I talk to see it. So when I give my perspective, my point of view, it could be really easy for somebody else to see it a different way, or maybe even get upset by it due to something that I didn't realize. So I'm curious, Richard, what have I been missing? So now I never use the word you. So you don't feel like you're being judged or under attack. I illustrate it like it's on me. It's my responsibility. And now my question isn't what made you mad. My question is, what did I miss? Which gives you the opportunity to save face, hopefully start to educate me, and open the door to a different hallway that we can metaphorically walk down together in this conversation.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation. I want to dive into another realm. Actually, there are two areas I want to go into. I'm going to start with not the body language this time, but the one's appearance, and it could be the clothes, could be the hair. I mean, you and I both have beards, although yours is a very well defined beard in the context that you have. It's very long in front, and a very unique. But I'm familiar with the style, and I'm sure there's a name for it, just as there's probably a name for mine. I'll have to check with my barber, who's been shaving beards and so forth for decades. See if he has any history on the different types of beards. I mean, I even think of Abraham Lincoln with a beard but no mustache in some pictures. I thought that was rather an interesting look. I tried that once. Doesn't look good on me. At least I don't think so. But clothes. Maybe you wear a hat. I normally wear a cowboy hat when I'm out and about and so forth. And I get compliments on occasion. And I think, if the hat was just sitting on a table, nobody would think any different. But because I'm wearing it, I don't know how it is. I must pull it off somehow. I want to talk a little bit about that. Does that really make that much difference? Or is it going to be the words that I'm speaking, the intention and the intonation that are going to make the biggest difference? Or can one's appearance be a distraction to the other person?
It most certainly can. So without geeking out too much, there's one research study out of Princeton that shows we're capable of judging 7 characteristics, including intention, integrity, and trustworthiness within 100 milliseconds after looking at somebody's face. A study out of the University of Glasgow shows we judge the same things in 500 milliseconds after hearing somebody say the word hello. A study out of the University of Colorado showed we're capable of labeling people within 100 milliseconds of looking at them. And although I haven't read it yet, I was just past a research study that showed we're capable of judging somebody's trustworthiness in 33 milliseconds. I haven't read that one yet, so I'll update you on what I find.
Okay.
But essentially, we are making right, wrong, or indifferent snap judgments on everything we see within the context of the situation, filtered through our expectations all the time. So for me, you were on video right now, but I'm assuming that you were interested in having this conversation because there was some sort of value from my work that you expected to get from the conversation. So if I logged in wearing clothes like I just came from the gym, you might be like, well, wait a minute, how professional could this guy be? You talk about wearing a cowboy hat. If I logged in dressed like I just got off my motorcycle, you might be like, wait, is this the same guy? Is this the guy I'm supposed to be talking with? So as silly as this might sound, for me, life is a costume party. And that doesn't mean that I'm being inauthentic or somebody I'm not. But if I have particular outcomes that I'm looking to achieve with a particular audience, then everything I say and do should be designed around achieving that outcome. And that was very true when I was in investigative interviewing. I would not alter how I dress wildly, but based on my wardrobe, dress accordingly based on who I was speaking with, all the way up until now. If I'm working with a construction company, I'll probably show up in jeans and a polo shirt if that's what they want. If I'm keynoting an event, I'll probably show up in a suit. But it's the same material, but how I present myself is going to significantly impact how people internalize it. People react the strongest to what they observe first. So I want to try to give people that first observation that is going to be beneficial, not a distraction. If I realize that my appearance is creating a distraction, then I need to somehow alter my delivery in order to try to reduce that distraction. Is it my volume, tone, speed of delivery, word choice, examples, topics? Maybe it's spacing. If we're in the same room, maybe I space myself out a little bit different. I can use all these things to try to manage that. But there is no doubt, whether we'd like to admit it or not, people react the strongest to what they observe first. And they're going to make those snap judgments based on what they see in relation to their expectations. And we have the opportunity to take advantage of that.
what strikes me interesting is this is not, and this is the question, this is not a process. The discipline listening method and all that you've described thus far is not a process of manipulation, at least not overt manipulation. Am I right or wrong? Is it a yes and no?
Well, I think the definition of manipulation is one of those things that's often in the eye or ear of the beholder, right?
Okay.
So I will say that everything we do, we strive to be ethical, value focused, and truth focused for a fact. I mean, we're very upfront about all of that. I would also contend that the word manipulation is a neutral term. It's not good or bad.
Okay.
We manipulate people all day long. We manipulate people we love. We manipulate people we care about. We manipulate strangers. Whether manipulation is good or bad has much more to do with our intentions, with the outcomes we're trying to achieve, with the techniques we use, and with our audience's ability to be aware that they may or may not be being manipulated. So for me, manipulated can be good or bad. Manipulation is dead neutral until the intentions, technique, outcomes, and those things start getting formed around it. And now we can start to make determinations as to whether we believe it's ethical or not.
Interesting. The other area that I wanted to go into, this was the second one, has to do with something we talk about on a regular basis. Every program we mention this. We encourage people to take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. How important is, however we want to phrase it, our intuition, our gut feeling, and so on and so forth to this process of listening?
It's extremely important. There are many times where our gut feeling is really our subconscious brain reminding us that we've seen this movie before. There is something happening in front of us that either in whole or part we've experienced before and we need to be in tune to. As an investigator, some of the most heartbreaking conversations I would have would be with victims who said, something didn't feel right, but I kept going. I knew something was different. I knew something was off, but I kept going. Well, had you listened to that gut I'm not blaming the victim. Please don't take it that way. But had they listened to their gut feeling, we might not be in this situation right now. In safety situations, listen to your gut feeling. If there ever is any doubt, there is no doubt, just get out of there. In a lot of our other conversations, I think the real skill comes with flushing out our gut feeling. So wait a minute, something feels great, something doesn't feel great, something's causing me to feel trusting, untrusting, skeptical, excited, whatever it is. Test that. Bring it to the surface. Okay, I wonder what that is. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I experiencing? Can I validate that? Can I ask questions or continue the interaction in another way in order to get another example that either proves or disproves my hypothesis? So we can work to bring the subconscious to the conscious in a lot of those conversations. But I would say, again, in a safety situation, trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, get out of there.
Fascinating, the work that you have done. And I'm curious, how long have you been doing this? I mean, obviously, all of the work that you've done in your career, the investigative work and so on and so forth, like for me, it's all cumulative. There's no, for me, there's never been a wasted period of time. I've learned something that has I brought forward from that experience and that one and that one. How about you? What would you say would be the beginning point? Is there a milestone, a marker?
Honestly, I think it can go all the way back to my childhood without sounding too crazy. Just how my dad raised me, and not to be the character on TV that you mentioned to start the conversation, but situations I was getting in and out of, things I had to learn. But then my early career, for sure, in my late teens, working with people that had communication challenges. So I think conservatively, I could say that I've been at this for over 30 years. If like you string all of those different careers together that have built the toolbox and the skill set that is currently being leveraged in all the work that we do.
It's fascinating. The one thing that really I struggled with over the years that I've been in this business was the area of sales. Now, up until now, I was never involved in the sales department, though I always felt I was part of it because I supported them. because I would produce what was needed for them to be able to take to the particular client, to say, hey, here's what we can provide for you, and so on and so forth. And either it worked or it didn't. But that was my role. Now it's direct. And I used to think, sales, that's just about trying to convince somebody to come on your station, and then give you a check. We'll produce what you want, and then you give us a check, and that was the goal. That was what I thought. And then I went to a meeting, and they said, "Oh no, sales is all about relationships." And I'm thinking, "Oh, that is a load of hooey." And then I started actually doing it, and I began to realize that is what sales is about, because we're doing it all the time in our relationships. Whether there's a financial exchange or not, that's what we're doing, is creating relationships. And this process, this disciplined listening method, is part of that process, isn't it?
It most certainly is. And we're all selling all the time. So whether we're selling an idea, whether we're selling a product, whether we're selling a service, whether I'm selling, my wife and son to agree with the decision that I want to make on a puppy that we just rescued. We're all selling all the time. And I do like how you phrase it around relationships. And often, if we just want to throw out the term leadership, our leadership, how people perceive our leadership, is often based on how they perceive us as listeners. So the more we can invest in listening and understanding other people's experiences, even going back to some of the wavelengths that you talked about looking earlier, whether they're doing that realistically because they have the waves in front of them, or they're just kind of going back and reflecting on their experiences, the more they feel listened to, the more they feel experienced and heard, the more they will be open to our ideas. So it's not just getting somebody in to give us a check or buy a service or purchase a product. We're constantly selling. We're selling ideas. We're selling relationships. We're selling trust. We're selling vulnerability. And the more we can keep that in mind in our conversations, the more successful we'll be. That's a great point.
I want to thank you for joining us here on the program. Michael Reddington is my guest, and his book is The Disciplined Listening Method. This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and Michael, I want to thank you so much for being with us here on the program. It's really been insightful for me. I hope that the conversation has been what it is supposed to be. That is a conversation, whether it's 5149 or however the math works out. It's just been a pleasure for you to have you here on the program and help us with the work that we're doing.
Well, I appreciate you having me so much. It was a conversation, and I truly enjoyed it, and I hope the listeners got a lot from it as well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I know we're short on time, so I'm going to get to it. I do have 3 final questions I ask all of my guests, and we'll jump right into the first of those 3 questions. Number 1, who is Michael Reddington?
I'm a teacher.
What gets you up in the morning?
My dogs and my son, typically.
And finally, what was your best day?
My best day had to be the day my son was born.
Once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, thanks. Continue to be happy, because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Michael, thank you so much for being in my life. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.